Hello guys, welcome to the Eat Like Ruby podcast. Welcome back if you're a regular listener. Welcome if you are a first-time listener. I am stoked to have you here. I'm here today doing a solo educational episode. If you are here for the first time, just know that every Wednesday we like to pick a topic and drop a nice, juicy educational episode with lots of facts, lots of information on that topic. And that's exactly what I'm here to do today. And today I'm going to talk about training, which is so exciting because we have gone so hard on the nutrition chat lately, which is awesome. Obviously, I am Eat Like Ruby. We are Eat Like Ruby, so it makes sense. But we dabble equal parts in nutrition and training. In Eat Like Ruby, obviously I'm a sports nutritionist and I'm a personal trainer, so we cover all nutrition and training, and we have just done so much nutrition chat lately. I think nutrition is awesome, obviously, but it's also a really big thing that people look at the start of the year. So I really wanted to cover that as quickly and as effectively as we could to really help people get set up for a successful 2025. So if you are here for the first time, or if you've been tapped out of the pod for a while because you've been holidaying through the festive season and living your best life, that is awesome. But we are going to talk about training today, and if you are keen for some nutrition chat, just know that our last 3 or 4 episodes, I would say, were really heavily nutrition focused. Episode on, I think it was about the 8th of January, called Fat Loss Facts, was our real foundation baseline education for nutrition and getting that set up for 2025. So if you are someone who is especially a beginner and really starting to learn and understand or wanting to learn and understand about flexible dieting, setting up your diet for body composition goals, especially fat loss, I would absolutely go back, listen to Fat Loss Facts, listen to those next 2 or 3 that came after that. And that will give you the combo of those 4 episodes will give you so much information to set up a successful nutrition approach for 2025. But today we're going to start to do the same with training, which is so exciting. And I'm going to do a few training episodes in a row for the next few Wednesdays. A little bit of a side note on that, we did drop the Friday episode last week as well. So if you've been around for a while, you will know it was a huge goal and a plan of mine to start bringing 2 episodes a week, or I'm going to say a minimum of 2 episodes a week, but we'll call it 2 for now, in 2025. And we did that for the first time last week. So last week we dropped 2 eps. This week we're going to drop 2, and we're going to keep dropping 2 moving forward. So with that structure, we're going to do that real educational, pick a topic, drop the facts on it every Wednesday. And then our Friday episode is just a little bit more chatty. I'm going to try and make them somewhat relevant to the Wednesday episode. If we did a real specific topic on the Wednesday, I'm going to do more just chatty, kind of how that can apply to people, how I see it apply to people, just random facts about that topic on the Friday. That might not always be the case, but I want to make them a little bit cohesive and kind of make everything flow nicely. But I'm already off topic. I'm already distracted. So I'm going to drop the training episode today, or we're going to get into the training chat today, but I'm also going to drop a fair few training episodes over the next few Wednesdays. I think we're going to go for about 2 or 3. This morning, I went for a walk and I've had these training episodes in my brain for probably about 2 or 3 months, and I was just waiting for the right time to do them. And this morning when I went for my walk, I was just sort of brain dumping everything I'd been sitting with. And I started looking at these notes thinking, this is not 2 episodes. This is at least 3, if not 4 episodes. So just know that next week and probably the week after, possibly even the week after, there's plenty more training chat coming, which is really cool. I'm really excited about it. So what I'm going to do today is kind of do what I did with nutrition, really start and build it from the ground up. So I'm going to cover the basics. This might be a little bit, I don't want to say beginner, because I think this information is still so beneficial for our advanced or our experienced girls to hear and take in and just understand. And I think I always say this, but I think we understand things more and more. The more we hear them, or we might explain them a little bit differently. And I think sometimes even when we explain things the same way, sometimes you might be ready to hear it. Sometimes you might not be. Sometimes it might not make sense because you're at the start of your journey. Then you hear it again 6 months later and you think, oh my God, that makes so much more sense to me now. So there might be some things today that, especially if you've been around Eat Like Ruby for a while and or your experience with training, you might know some of this stuff. We might be reiterating some stuff you already know, but I still think it's so beneficial to hear it and either be like, oh yeah, cool, that makes a bit more sense to me now, or even just have a bit of a reminder and be like, yeah, fuck yeah, I did know that. Oh, I'll come back to that. But I did know that. And it's cool to just kind of confirm that you know your shit and you're on track. The reason I said I'll come back to that is because if you listen to last Friday episode, you'll know that we bought in the swear jar, and I've just dropped my first F-bomb of this episode. So that is one for the swear jar. So I will make a note of that and we'll see. I'm really trying to rein in the swearing because I want people to be able to share the episodes with people they think might benefit from hearing it. And I think for a lot of people that could be their daughters or their auntie or their mum. And I never want someone to think like, oh, I really want to share this episode, but the person I want to share it with probably wouldn't appreciate Ruby's language. I really want to change the language so more people can benefit from the pod. So I'm trying my best with that. I've got the swear jar here and we will see how we go. But like I was saying, we're going to start today with really the foundation of training, the basics of training. And today's episode is probably going to be a little bit less about training and more so about calories burnt / energy expenditure. And again, if you hear that and think, oh, I already understand this, I want a little bit more advanced info about really setting up structured training, just know that that is absolutely coming. That is literally sitting in my notes under the stuff I'm going to talk about today. So just know that that is coming. But I think the best way to approach this is to lay the foundations and explain movement overall, calories burnt, energy expenditure, etc., and how training factors into that and how all of that pieces together. And then we can get into the best way to set up training over the next few weeks when we know and understand the base information that we're going to cover today. So if we get into it, some of the comments or the things I just mentioned there being calories burnt and energy expenditure. First of all, the thing I want to say is those two things kind of mean the same thing. And similar to the last few weeks where we spoke about like energy coming in, calories coming in, etc., we're now kind of talking about the other part of that where there's energy and calories going out. And those comments and those sayings or those descriptions are interchangeable. So if we think about energy expenditure, that's really how much energy are we expending. Like we spoke about in recent weeks, calories are energy. So expending energy is like expending calories, aka using calories, burning calories, etc. So I just like to explain that because I feel like that's obviously quite basic knowledge to me. And then I kind of use those terms so interchangeably. And I'm always like, oh, I hope people actually understand what all that means. So really just have a think about that. Energy expenditure is how much energy we are expending, aka how much energy we are using. Calories are energy, therefore that's how many calories we're using, how many calories we're expending, how many calories we're burning. And think back to the last 3 or 4 weeks where we've spoken about calories coming in. Now we're really looking at the calories going out. And obviously if we think about people that rip into a training routine and a diet in the new year, but especially today we're going to look at that training routine, often that can be done in the mindset or the mentality of like, how many calories can I burn? How much fat can I burn? You might understand what I just said. You might not understand what I just said, but I think the real sort of common theme we see, especially coming into the new year or anytime someone really rips into an aggressive approach, is like, how hard can I go? How much how much fat can I burn? How much calories can I burn, etc. And that's really what I want to look at today and break down today. And then once we've covered that, I also want to have a little look at different goals. If we look at people setting up nutrition and training for the year or at any time, we can obviously have different goals in terms of fat loss, muscle gain, maybe mental health, enjoyment, social health, injury, recovery, rehab, prehab. There's so many things we can train for. So I'm going to dabble a little bit into what we want to be thinking about depending on what the goal is. So I'm going to start with the real explanation of that energy expenditure / calories burnt chat. And this is really, really cool to understand and really get your head around. If you are someone who's thinking, I just need to go to the gym as much as I can, I need to run as much as I can, train as much as I can, and you're really in that mindset and that energy of like smashing yourself with training. This is what I really, really want to speak to because there's so much going on there that I think if we understood this a little bit more, we'd approach it differently. So when we look at energy expenditure, what we technically describe energy expenditure as is TDEE, and that stands for total daily energy expenditure, which can sound like a mouthful, but it's exactly what it sounds like. Total daily energy expenditure is the total amount of energy that we expend in the day. And if we think about what I said before, that's really the total amount of calories that we burn/use in the day. If we think back to the last few weeks' convo, where we've spoken about the calories and the energy coming in, total daily energy expenditure is quite a big factor when we want to set up something like a calorie deficit, because if we're looking at how much is coming in, we also need to be aware of how much is going out so that we can ensure we've got that deficit in place. Obviously, if we're controlling how much we bring in to work towards fat loss, if we're setting up that effective deficit, like we've said, we need to have less coming in than going out. So therefore, we need to be mindful and understanding roughly of how much is going out. So there's a lot to talk about here, but this starts with the TDEE because that is our total daily energy expenditure, aka total calories burnt or used for the day. And I think the thing that a lot of people don't understand is we use calories in so many ways, and often the calories/energy that we're using for training is nowhere near as much and therefore nowhere near as impactful as a lot of people think. And what I mean by that is, if we think about those scenarios I said before, where so many people are smashing themselves with training and really thinking that training is the one opportunity that I have to burn energy and burn fat, that's actually not the case. And I'm going to break that down right now, because when we look at total daily energy expenditure, it's made up of 4 things. There are 4 things that contribute to the total energy that the body uses every day. The first one is what we call BMR. This stands for basal metabolic rate, and this is essentially like our metabolism, or how much energy our body uses and needs to simply be alive before we factor in any movement. Literally, if we were to wake up, lay in bed all day and not move or get up or do a single thing, our body still needs a certain amount of energy coming in to keep us alive and keep our organs functioning. So that's so important to be aware of and understanding, because again, a lot of people can think the only time we use calories or burn energy or burn calories or burn fat is when we're grinding in the gym. But if we think about the fact that the body simply needs energy and calories to stay alive, we're still using them when we're literally laying in bed all day. I'm not advising we lay in bed all day unless we need to, but it's just an important thing to understand. So that is our BMR, basal metabolic rate. This will be different for every single person because the factors that contribute to this are gender, age, height, weight. If we think about how much energy is required to fuel a really petite female versus a huge male, if we think about myself and my husband, most people know my husband, Shaq, literally 100 kilo male, 2 meters tall, me, 60 kilo female, 160 something centimeters tall. There's going to be a different amount of energy required to simply fuel our body and our organs and keep us alive. He's like a way bigger machine. If we think about that, he needs more fuel. He needs more to just support him and keep him going. Obviously, like I said, if we think about smaller females, it's going to be less. So there's no one number for this. It's going to be so different from person to person. And it's absolutely worth having a play around with calorie calculators or programs or anything to just give you like a little bit of an understanding of this. We don't need to know the exact number. We're never working in those exact numbers, but being aware, because even if I look at my own BMR, it's around 1,200 to 1,300 calories. That's how many calories my body needs every day to literally just stay alive. If I did not take a single step, if I did not train, if I didn't do anything, my body still needs that to just keep me going. And that's so interesting to think about, because when we start to look at setting up nutrition targets and approaches and everything, we need a decent amount coming in to just keep us alive before we factor in anything else. So it's really cool to A, start to understand that, but then B, start to become aware of what that actually looks like for you. And as a side note, if you're in Eat Like Ruby and you've got the calorie calculator, it will tell you this. When you enter your details at the top, there's literally a line that says basal metabolic rate, and it'll tell you what this is. And again, that's just cool to understand, especially if we're someone who thinks like the only time I use calories or burn fat is in the gym. Your body's using a ton before we even move for the day. So really cool to understand, really cool to start to get your head around. Like I said before, total daily energy expenditure is made up of 4 things. BMR is literally one of them. Another one is what we call TEF, which stands for thermic effect of feeding. And this is basically how much energy your body uses to consume, digest, and absorb food. This can get a little bit complicated. This can get a little bit intricate. But really, if we think about the body consuming a meal, it goes through the digestive system, it absorbs the nutrients, it goes to its processes, and it goes through all of that. The body is working to do that. And if we think about BMR, which I just explained before, being the amount of calories the body uses just to stay alive before we factor in anything else, when we then start eating, the body is going to work harder, the organs and everything start to work harder to go through that process I just said of consumption, absorption, digestion, etc. So therefore, the amount of energy the body needs and / the amount of energy the body is using has now increased. And obviously then we start to have energy coming in and then there's some more going out, and this is where we start to obviously set up our own deficit and assess this, and this is a whole nother topic, but just another cool thing to understand that when we start bringing in food, we then increase how much energy the body is using a little bit more from that baseline BMR amount. So that's two of the things that make up our energy expenditure. Another one is what we call NEAT, which stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And basically what this is how much energy the body uses to perform movements that aren't intentional exercise. So if we think about walking around at the shops, walking around our house, cleaning the house, playing with pets, playing with kids, any movement at all that is not you intentionally going for a run or going to a class or going for a workout is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And again, it sounds like a little bit of a mouthful, but when you really sort of break down that title, it makes sense. Non-exercise activity. Yeah, that makes sense. So movement that I'm doing that is not exercise. So this can be a huge factor and a huge percentage of our TDEE, or it can be really small. Because if we think about this, if someone is super active, gets heaps of steps every day, because side note, steps are part of our non-exercise activity thermogenesis. If it's not like going for a run or steps we get doing a step class or something like that, if you just naturally have high steps because of your job or your lifestyle, then if you really think about it, those are a huge contributor to the energy you're using every day, but they're not intentional exercise. So they fall into this category. And what I was saying there is, some people have really high steps. They're very active. If you do chase pets, kids, things like that every day, if you have a really active job, if you're someone who, always parks really far away at the shops and walks in, there's so many little factors that seem like they might not matter, and they probably wouldn't matter on their own. But when we step back and assess the lifestyle as a whole, obviously all those little things are going to add up to a person being active or not so active. And then bring that back to the fact that our non-exercise activity thermogenesis can be a huge percentage of our overall energy that we're using for the day, or it can be a really small percentage. If you're not an active person, if you don't get many steps, if you sit at a desk all day, you sit in traffic on the way home, and then you go home and sit on the couch, your overall activity is going to be quite low. If we think about a person, like I said, chasing after kids, pets, anything else, if they then go and work in an active job all day, if you do park far away when you go to the shops, if you do clean your house all the time, all of these things adding up, you're going to have a way more active lifestyle. And therefore, the percentage of your total daily energy expenditure that's coming from this active lifestyle / non-exercise activity thermogenesis is going to be a lot higher. So when we step back and look at what percentage these things contribute to the total daily energy expenditure, it will be so different from person to person because of all these little factors that I keep mentioning. And our final thing that contributes to the total daily energy expenditure is exercise activity thermogenesis, which is the energy / calories we are using towards intentional training. If you think about exercise activity thermogenesis, it's movement that is intentional exercise. So that can be going to the gym, going for a run, playing a sport, going to a class, anything at all where you're intentionally getting up and doing a workout. Coming back to what I just said before, where what percentage each of these things make up in our total energy expenditure, if we think about exercise activity thermogenesis, if we have a day where we do a really intense hard workout and we don't do much non-exercise activity thermogenesis, like we do a really hard workout and then we lay on the couch, right? Our non-exercise activity thermogenesis would contribute a really low percentage to the total energy we've used that day. And the exercise activity thermogenesis would be a really high percentage of the energy used that day. And then if we go into the next day and we have a rest day from training, our exercise activity thermogenesis would be 0% that day, but we might be super active with steps and things like that. And that non-exercise activity thermogenesis might be way higher. I hope I'm not confusing people because there's so many mouthfuls here, but the reason that I really wanted to bring this convo forward and explain this is because, like I keep saying, I think so many people put all their eggs in one basket thinking the only place I burn calories or burn energy is when I'm training. If we think about a rest day, none of your energy or calories burnt that day have come from training, but your body still is alive and functioning, so your BMR is still there. Your thermic effect of feeding is still at play if you're eating food, which is where the body is using energy to consume, digest, and absorb food. And then your non-exercise activity thermogenesis is at play as well, because if you are getting up and doing anything at all, you're moving and that movement is using energy. So it's just really cool to understand that our overall energy expenditure comes from all of those things that I just said, and it's not just about training. And I'm going to pivot the convo a little bit here and kind of niche in a little bit, because there's so many ways we can use training. Even if we think about long-term listeners will know, or long-term followers on Instagram, side note, eat_like_Ruby. But if you've been around for a while, you'll know that my husband is literally prepping to compete in an Ironman event. He's done a lot of half Ironman, triathlon, and all of that. So the point of his training is very different to the point of someone's training who is trying to grow their glutes or trying to lose weight or training for mental health. Like, we can train for so many different things. And I really want to point that out and remind people of that, because I think people can get into that mindset of just being like, what's the best way to train? And if we think about that, the best way is going to be different depending on the goal and where that person is at and what they want to work towards, etc. So again, it can just be like a cool thing to kind of clock your mentality towards that. If you are someone who's thinking in that mindset of like, what's the best way to train? Step back for a minute, open your mind and go, best for what? And then when we kind of open our mind, and I always talk about this with nutrition as well, because I think, again, people are like, what's the best diet? Well, again, best for what? The best thing for Shaq competing in a 12-hour Ironman event is going to be very different than the best thing for a person who works at a desk all day. So I just think it's so important to kind of, I think when we're in that mindset of like, what's the best way to do it? Usually that's quite heightened, quite frantic, quite scattered. They're like, I need the best thing. When we can like drop that intensity for a minute, open our mind and just go, there are so many ways we can set up nutrition and training, and the quote best way to do that is going to be so dependent on me, my goals, the time in my life, what works best for me, what I want to work towards, etc. This is why I say so often there's no right or wrong, because again, what's right for Shaq doing an Ironman is going to be different than what's right for a person who wants to gain muscle. That's going to be different from a person who wants to achieve fat loss. There's so many things we can work towards, and we never want to get stuck in like, what's the best way? We want to get educated on things like I just spoke about for the last 25 minutes and think, okay, cool, knowing what I now know, what's the best way for me and what I currently want to work towards? That is literally the ultimate place to get to, in my opinion. But I'm a little bit off topic. What I was saying is I do want to niche in a little bit on like the best way to train for females who want to work towards improved body composition with like fat loss, building shape, toning up, maybe a little bit of muscle gain, etc. I think that's obviously what we heavily work towards in Eat Like Ruby. If we look at programs like the fat loss phase, muscle gain phase, strong gal phase, training, like implementing structured training programs, etc., the real focus for our girls is body composition, a little bit of performance stuff with lifts and PBs, etc. But I want to kind of hone in on that, like females that have body comp goals and want to look at training for that. So I am going to get into this more over the next few weeks. So if I drop a few things here that you don't fully understand, just know that I'm going to keep breaking this down more and more as the weeks go on. But when we're looking at a female that wants to have a nice shape and lean toned physique, if we think about like, oh, I want nice toned legs and I want a nice booty, and sometimes people want like those nice little cap shoulders, little bit of back, like shape through my back, nice small waist. Everyone's going to be a little bit different on the specifics, but overall it's like that lean toned physique with a nice shape. If we look at that, this is a combo of having enough muscle on that frame and then having a low enough amount of body fat on that muscle to reveal it and have it look nice and lean and toned. And again, I'll speak about this more as the weeks go on, but the way we achieve that is through structured progressive resistance training. If we think about like building nice legs, building a nice booty, having nice arms, nice shoulders, nice back, those things are built. We build that little bit of shape through them. And then, like I said, when we have a low enough amount of body fat sitting on top of that shape, we can obviously reveal it. And the reason I'm explaining this and the reason I want to get into this is because the way we build shape and we build a nicer little amount of muscle on the frame is through structured progressive training and recovery from that structured progressive training. And this is a huge thing to understand and be aware of, because what I mean here is let's look at someone who either wants to build nice shape through their legs and or their glutes, right? We obviously want to go into the gym and we want to work those muscles. We want to work the hammies, quads, glutes, etc. The way we work a muscle is through progressive overload. And in simple terms, that's basically like pushing the muscle a little bit to do things it hasn't done before. Maybe you do 50 kilo back squats and then eventually you work to 55 and eventually you work to 60 and 65, 70, etc. That's just one example of how we can progressively overload a muscle. But what I mean by that is we've asked the muscles to do 50 kilo squats and then eventually we ask them to do 55 and they go, shit, this is harder than last time. I need to work. I need to adapt to this. I need to get better to handle this. And then we go through that and then we ask them to do 60 and they go through that same process. Shit, this is a little bit harder again. I've got to get better. This is a very, very simplified explanation of what happens when we lift weights. But the reason I want to talk about this is because that is how muscle gain and therefore how shape change occurs. We push the body a little bit to its limit, to its edges. The body then has to work a little bit harder because it's not used to doing what we're asking it to do. And what happens there is the muscle fibers break down and then they rebuild and repair bigger, stronger, faster, etc. to be able to handle the shit we're asking it to do now. I nearly didn't say shit, but then I remembered shit is allowed in the swear jar. But that's literally the point of training. And when we talk about muscle fibers breaking down, that can sound like a bad thing, but it is a good thing when it is done in like a minor gradual way. If we think about, like I said before, taking 50 kilo squats to 55s, or maybe we take literally like lateral raises from 5 kilos to 6 kilos. These are all just examples, but anytime we're just pushing that little bit more, like I said, the body is essentially in a position where it goes, shit, this is a little bit harder than it normally is. I need to be better at this. The muscle fibers break down because we've pushed them to the point of doing so. Then they rebuild and repair, which can take a few days, like it's going to be sort of different case by case, but usually it's a few days. And this is why, again, super simple explanation, but this is why we would look at something like training legs on Monday and then training them again on Thursday or Friday. Because we train them Monday, we push them to that point, they go through this process, they rebuild, repair, we hit them again Thursday, Friday, they go through that process, we hit them again next Monday. That is the point of structured progressive training. I'm going to talk about that in the next few weeks, but what I want to bring to people's attention here is the growth and the progress happens during the recovery. It happens when we're out of the gym. So if we think about someone stuck in the mentality of, I need to go to the gym as often as I can, train as hard as I can, push as much as I can, it's just like grind energy, we're missing the mark on the most effective, smart way to train, especially when we're looking at goals like creating nice shape, toning up, being lean, all of the things I keep mentioning. If that's happening in the recovery process, like I just explained, but we're essentially cock-blocking our recovery process because we're like, I need to go to the gym as much as I can, we're missing the mark. And this is where, and I don't say this to be rude or shame or judge, but I think we can all relate to seeing those people in your gym that's just like, this person is here all the time. And they don't really look any different and they don't really look like they're getting anywhere. And I never want to shame that because that person might just be going to the gym for social health, mental health, anything at all. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to speak about that in a second. But this is where we can see those people that are like addicted to training. I need to go as much as I can. I need to be burning calories, burning energy, burning fat, etc. But they don't have like awesome physiques to show for it. I think it's really cool to clock that and really bring it back to what I was just saying, where if we do have smart, structured, progressive training in place and we are pushing the body to that progressive overload adaptation point, for the body to go through adaptation and that process, like I said before, of the muscle fiber breaking down, rebuilding, repairing, recovering, we need to let that muscle go through that process. There's no point hitting it again the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. And again, this is where people get stuck in quantity over quality. Quality training is having that smart, effective, structured program and having really intentional sessions in place, hitting that session as well as you can, stepping away from that muscle and that movement for a while, and then going back and hitting it again, stepping away, hitting it again, and getting that structured routine in place where we do train really well and then we step away and let those things recover. And therefore, over time, they're going through that rebuild, repair, bigger, stronger, faster, whatever it is that we're training for. This is like, I don't want to get too off topic, but this is where, if people are training for speed, if people are training for anything at all, you're training in a way that like optimizes that thing. And then your muscles and your body are going through that process of going like, shit, you're trying to push me to run a bit further. You're trying to push me to run a bit faster. Again, depending on the goal, you push the edges of that a little bit. If we think about a person who's can run 5Ks and they want to run 10, they push to like 5.5. They sit there for a while. Then they push to 6. They sit there for a while. They push to 7. They sit there for a while. Again, they're just pushing the body to that edge and essentially saying to the body, I want you to start to be able to do this now. The body has to work to be able to do that. Once it gets conditioned to it and it can do it, then we push it to that next level. Okay, now that you can do that, I want you to start to be able to do this. That is the point of training, regardless of the goal, regardless of what we're working towards, is pushing that edge, letting the body adapt and become conditioned to that edge, and then pushing the next one. Like I said before, I'm going to niche in, like we've just heard for the last 40 minutes, on how we do this more so for body comp and the gym gal style. Because like I said, we could talk about this for sports, running, sprinting, long distance, swimming, anything at all. The overall point of training is the same, but the way we set it up for the goal is going to be a little bit different. So when we're looking at setting it up for wanting to have that nice shape and tone and leanness and all the things I keep talking about, this is what we want to be thinking about. And the last few things I want to say on this topic before I move into the next few episodes is, like I've said a couple of times really briefly here, we can have any goal with training. Like we don't have to train for body composition. I know that so many of my girls want to, and that's kind of why we're here. So that's obviously why I go really hard on that chat. But equally, I know there's people that just want to train for social health or mental health or enjoyment. So you might join a group fitness place where it's like, I don't actually care about my glutes and my quads and all those things. I just want to have a place that I can go to every day and make friends and like have a laugh while I get a bit of movement in. That's friggin' awesome. I never want to shame that. I never want to act like one style of training is better. This is why, like I said before, there's no best way to train, because if your goal was social health, mental health and enjoyment, community vibes, joining a group fitness thing would absolutely be the best thing for you. It's probably like a nightmare to think about going to the gym with your headphones in and training by yourself. So nothing is right or wrong. It's really dependent on your goal and what you want to get out of your training. The main thing that I always want to get across is making sure that people understand what's required to achieve their goal. So if you were someone that was like, I really do want to grow my glutes, grow my quads, etc., but you're going to like a group fitness cardio class every day, you're probably not going to, well, you're not going to progress towards the goal of growing muscle. If we think about growing muscle happening through weightlifting, you're going to a cardio class every day, there's a big disconnect there. So nothing is wrong or like the wrong way to train, but it's just important to think, okay, cool, what do I want to get out of this? And therefore, do I have the right thing in place? And you can tweak that as much as you need to suit you. It's like what we talk about with nutrition, where you might have phases where you put a really aggressive deficit in place or a really aggressive diet in place. Then you might have phases where you're really chilled. You might have maintenance breaks, move away from tracking, go out for meals. Like we can do all of these things. And we always just want to understand, okay, if I do X, Y, Z, this is the outcome it's going to lead to? Am I okay with the outcome? Is that the outcome I want right now, etc.? And just always having the understanding and awareness of that. I think that is the most important thing, in my opinion, for people to always know that, like, what's required to achieve their goal and make that decision themselves. Do I want to do that thing right now? Do I not? Am I happy with the outcome I'm going to get from the thing I am doing, etc.? I never want people to feel like I'm busting my ass at the gym to achieve a certain result and I'm not getting that result and I don't understand why. That is really why I love to deliver big, chatty podcasts like this. And guys, I nearly dropped an F-bomb in there and I caught myself. So the swear jar is working. But what I was saying there is you can find a sweet spot with any of these things. And what I mean by that is you might say, yeah, I do have a goal to grow my legs and my quads and my glutes, but I also do have a goal to have some social fitness or some like community fitness in place as well. And then that might mean that you go to the gym 2 or 3 days a week and follow a structured program. And then you go to a class once or twice a week for the social side of it and the fun side of it, the community side of it. That's not wrong. That's not bad. And if you're an Eat Like Ruby and you're setting things like that up, ask me. Be like, Rubes, I'm thinking of doing this 2 days and this 2 days. Do you think that makes sense? Anything I should think about, etc. If we can't tell, I love to talk about this shit. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. It's really cool to just think about like, okay, cool, what do I want to get out of training? If there's multiple things, like I just said, maybe I've got booty goals, but I've also got social fitness goals. How do I make them work together? And you absolutely can if you know all of this stuff, and you might have to tweak some things that might be like, okay, definitely get these 2 sessions done every week. Definitely don't overdo it with the group stuff. And again, that circles back to what I just said before. If you do want to overdo it with the group stuff and go every single day, that's totally fine. But you want to make sure you're understanding and aware of what that might mean for your goals and your outcomes, etc. And the last little thing I want to talk about here, guys, is kind of just how we tie all this in together. And especially if we're looking at fat loss, because I know it's a common thing for people to look at. I know this is a common time of year to look at it. If you are working towards a fat loss goal right now, the couple of little things I would think about is that really first big point we made of the fact that fat loss will come down to calories in versus calories out. And we've spoken so much in the last month about the calories coming in. So make sure you've got your head around that, listen to those, understand that. And then calories coming out, like we just spoke about before, comes from so many things. So do not think I have to smash as much training as I can to have heaps of calories coming out to work towards a fat loss goal. Your quote calories coming out, aka your energy expenditure, comes from a lot of factors, and training is quite a small part of those factors. If we think about the fact that the body is always using energy and calories, but we train for maybe 3 to 6 hours a week, I don't know how many hours there are in a week, 100 and something, and we're training for 3 to 6 of them. Your body's using energy in so many other ways all the time. So don't get caught up in thinking that it's only training that's going to contribute to that energy expenditure. But like I was saying, if we do have the fat loss goal, we want to obviously calculate the deficit, have an idea of our steps and the energy we're using. We speak so much in Eat Like Ruby about how we actually assess if that's working for us, how to adjust it, etc. But we can obviously increase our training a little bit if we want to increase that calories burnt a little bit. And what I mean by that is, you might have like a structured program in place, and then you might also be like, you know what, when I'm at the gym, I'm going to do an extra 10-minute walk on the treadmill. I'm going to do 10 minutes on the cross trainer just to ramp up. If we think about jumping on the cross trainer for 10 minutes, I've got no idea how many calories that would burn. Maybe 30, maybe 50, I don't know. But if you think about adding that to your gym routine 4 times a week, that could be really beneficial. If it works for you, if you enjoy it, if it works for your schedule, etc. It's definitely not something we have to do if we think about everything that is contributing to our energy intake and output. 30 calories on the cross trainer is definitely not going to be the deciding factor. We can absolutely achieve fat loss without it. But at the same time, you might look and go, yeah, but that's something that I either A, enjoy, or B, could easily do and I'm happy to do to increase my energy output a little bit. Again, there's no right or wrong. Set it up alongside everything else to work in the best way for you. The one thing I will say with that, the 2 things I will say with that before we wrap up is if you do that, if you look at your training routine and think, where could I ramp up my energy expenditure through training? The 2 things we want to be mindful of. If we do this too aggressively, too hard, think about the fact that the body is, like if we're setting up a deficit, less energy coming in than going out, aka less calories coming in than going out, the body is then looking for additional calories to fill that gap. And this is how fat loss occurs, right? The body goes, you're moving a lot, you're doing a lot. You're not giving me the same amount of energy in return through food. I need to bridge the gap and find those extra calories / energy somewhere. If you don't understand this, go back and listen to the last 4 episodes. We broke this down heaps. But if we are putting the body in that position, if we do that too aggressively, too intensely, the body will pull from anything it can to bridge that gap, and the body can pull from muscle. The body can pull and start to use / burn muscle, for lack of a better term, to give it enough energy to bridge that gap. We do not want this. It's obviously we want muscle mass on the frame for like strength and health for life, and especially as we continue on and age in life, we want to have a good amount of muscle mass on our frame to help us get through life. But if we think about wanting shape and tone and leanness and all those things as well, we want a nice little bit of muscle underneath to create that shape. If we put such an aggressive protocol in place that the body's just like, shit, I need to get energy from anywhere. Side note, guys, I just stopped myself saying the F word again. If the body's in that position where it goes, this gap is so big, this deficit is so big, I am just drastically pulling energy from anywhere I can, we can start to use muscle mass. This is where we can see people who are like obsessed with training or long distance running or anything like that. And again, I'm not trying to shame, that don't eat enough and then have like a very skinny, scrawny frame. And again, I'm not trying to be rude, I'm not trying to shame, but this is the body essentially going, you ask me for so much energy. I don't have much fat to give you. The only thing I can give you here is muscle mass and things that you don't want to draw energy from. So this is why it's so important to have a moderate, healthy deficit in place, because if we've got the excess body fat there and we've got the small deficit in place, the body's just gradually pulling that out. If it gets too extreme, too aggressive, the body's just like, shit, give me whatever you've got. Give me whatever you can to get me through the day. We don't want to push to that point. And the other thing we want to think about here is we don't want to push to the point where we are training so hard and so aggressively that we get super hungry, cranky, cravings, etc. And I think a lot of people can relate to this. If you think about someone who's on an aggressive diet all day and then bust their ass to go to the gym after work, spends an hour on the cross trainer, just like smashing it out. If you then walk in the door and think, oh my God, I'm so exhausted, I'm hungry, I'm cravings, I'm cranky, I'm all these things, to the point where you walk up to the cupboard and grab a handful of Tim Tams, 2 or 3 Tim Tams, biscuits, anything at all, you've just bridged that gap and essentially undone the last hour of training you just did in the gym. And I never want people to think about training in terms of like, oh, if I burnt this, I can eat this. And I think that can become quite unhealthy, like quite an unhealthy mindset quite quickly. But I think it's just so important to understand, again, we see this with nutrition alone, where if someone puts too much of an aggressive deficit in place, it's like push, 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 and then I break and I eat everything in sight, right? Because if it was just too hard, too restrictive. The same thing can happen where we're asking too much of the body physically with aggressive training. We're not giving it enough nutrition / energy in return. I nearly dropped another F-bomb. This swear jar is great. If we're not giving it that energy and the nutrition in return, again, to the point where we just snap, maybe like I said, we walk in the door and we snap and we start snacking. Maybe we get to the end of the week and think, oh my God, I'm so hungry, my energy's so low, etc. Stuff it, I'm going out for dinner. I've just avoided another F-bomb. But if we just push too hard to the point where we snap, there's no point. If we push it so far and we have something so aggressive and restrictive in place that it pushes us to the point where we can't stick to it for very long, maybe every day, maybe every few days, we want to look at that and go, okay, cool. If I scaled that training back a little bit, made it a bit more moderate and just had a nice progressive resistance program in place that I was happy to work through, and it left me in that sweet spot where there's enough of a deficit, but it's not such an like ass-kicking grind that it's pushing me to breaking point, that's going to be a lot more effective over time, as opposed to someone that's hitting breaking point, like I said, either daily or every few days, and therefore everything's coming undone. I hope that made sense. I think if you tie that into the last few episodes we've done to really understand all of that. That would be so helpful, so beneficial. And like I said at the start of the year, guys, I want these Wednesday episodes to flow on from each other. So again, if you are listening to this one thinking, I've got a bit of missing information here, I don't understand all of this, I would go back to that Fat Loss Facts episode that we dropped early Jan, listen from there up to this point, and I think everything would tie in a lot and fill any gaps that you might not be understanding from today's episode. The very last thing I'm going to say, guys, is if we really think about everything I've just explained, whether the goal is fat loss, muscle gain, shape, toning, if it's like body composition focused, and the little side note I'll say there is we can absolutely have body composition goals and performance goals at the same time. You might say like, I'm going to gym because I want the shape, I want the leanness, I want to be nice and toned, but I'm also chasing like a hip thrust PB and I want to be able to do some chin ups, etc. at the same time. That's really cool. I think that's the perfect sweet spot to be in if you want to be a gym gal that lifts weights. I think that's awesome. That's absolutely me. I'm all for it. But if we really think about whether the goal is fat loss, muscle gain, shape, toning, anything, we want the moderate deficit in place if it is a fat loss goal. And then if it's maintenance or it's surplus or whatever, then we can set up nutrition according to that. Then we want a structured, progressive program in place that's working towards the things you want to work towards. And for most of us, that's just like the overall shape and tone, which is really cool with some of those lifts in there, like I just said. We want that to be the main focus of our training. If we feel like we can add any little extra things, like I said, a little bit on the treadmill, a little bit on the cross trainer, an extra walk once or twice a week, if that feels good for you, it's sustainable, it's enjoyable, that's awesome. If you can't do those things or you don't want to do those things, having a structured progressive resistance training program in place, being active enough with your steps and your overall lifestyle, and then setting up your nutrition to work with that. If we think about calculating our deficit or our maintenance or anything, we factor in our movement, aka our steps, into that equation. So if you've put the training in place that works for you, you're doing the amount of steps that works for you, and then you're setting up nutrition according to those things, that is the ultimate sweet spot to not overdo it, work towards the shape and the toning and the leanness and all those things I keep saying through training, but then know that your other habits, being nutrition and steps, are set up in a way that currently work towards your goal. If it's fat loss, if it's maintenance, if it's weight gain, we use those things to leave us in the deficit or the maintenance or the surplus, while the structured program is always in place to optimize shape, muscle mass, tone, performance, etc. I think that is the perfect place to wrap up. That was a nice long episode, but I think that's really kind of the foundation stuff we want to understand through training. And I think there's definitely a few gaps in there, and I think I'm going to fill those gaps in the next few weeks. So if you heard something there where you're like, oh, I don't fully understand the best structured program to have in place, that combo is absolutely coming. If there's anything else we don't understand, definitely tune in over the next few weeks and we'll fill any gaps and we'll keep this training combo going. And then like always, guys, at some point we'll do some Q&A apps. So that's a really cool opportunity where you put out the Q&A form and people can submit anything that they want further info on, and we can just keep this educational podcast rolling throughout 2025. Like always, guys, please rate, review, and share the pod. It means so much to me to get the ratings and the reviews, and I love seeing them on your Instagram stories, especially if you're a gym gal. If you're in the gym and you're listening to this, or if you're doing your walks and you're listening to this, chuck it on your stories. I absolutely love to see it, and it reaffirms that people are listening, they're picking up what I'm putting down, and therefore I can keep the podcast coming multiple times a week throughout the year. Thank you so much, guys.